Well, people have been asking me to talk about this situation ever since it was brought to light, and it seems like my livestream covering the topic wasn't enough to satiate most people, so here I am, once again taking a look at the commentary creator known as Creepshow Art. To give a bit of context, Creepshow Art has existed on YouTube as a key commentator for a long period of time now, and to be honest, her content was never really my cup of tea, mostly because her channel was nothing but spilling it. She just felt too much like a tabloid news site that pumped out stories at a rapid pace with a condescending attitude the game's journalists only wish they could accomplish. You might know that I previously covered some of her behavior relating to the Hopeless Peaches drama a while back. Hell, you might be looking at this video entirely because of that one and wanting me to make a follow-up. I initially didn't want to make a full-blown video discussing the topic since I've grown tired of doing follow-ups on creators I've already talked about. But this shitstorm eventually got me so invested I just had to talk about it. To explain, Creepshow recently was outed by the administrators of a site called lolcow.forum. Basically think of it like a female majority 4chan, for a whole lot of behavior I'll briefly get into later. Shannon has made a few responses to this, none in video, but if you took the time to actually look at the comments she made, it would become incredibly obvious how two-faced and incorrect all of what she truly says is. I want to make it entirely clear the main point of my video isn't really just pointing to the docs and saying what's in them, but conveying how that information factors into her response and why it can be proven to be a lie in almost every capacity. We're also going to be taking a look at Emily Artful a little bit later down the line, but yeah, for now, getting to the community post itself, I'm going to be doing a point-by-point breakdown on the most important parts of it, showing why what she says either is unable to be verified, contains completely incorrect information, doesn't hold up from a logical sense, how it reflects on Shannon as a person, and just how much wrong she did to get to where she is now.
This post just going up because I need to talk about this and let you know what's going on. Earlier today I got a message saying that I had doxed a relative, that I had been called out for saying certain things about myself and other creators, and more on a hate forum.
First contradiction, Shannon refers to lolcow as a hate site, despite the fact that within the common thread, the second post shows the anonymous user posting an image of Shannon explicitly saying her video on lolcow, which she recently deleted, is going to be positive way back in 2018. And another comment after that does the same. Her referring to it as a hate site could mean one of a few things. A, she wants people to think she doesn't know anything about the website by using vague enough wording to make it seem as though she's only barely grasping the situation. B, she intentionally says hate forum instead of the actual name in order to make it seem as though she's vehemently against the site despite apparently not knowing the name, contradicting what she said about it in the past. C, she just didn't say the name of it or provide any links because she hoped her audience would remain blissfully unaware and listen to her instead of reading the comment thread, or D, all of the above. There is no good reason for why Shannon wouldn't say the name of the website or link the thread beyond that, and her wording definitely implies the other options I listed, and as I continue going through this, it'll become blatantly more obvious she was banking off people not looking at the thread.
However, after being sent screenshots of what I allegedly said about me, myself, my friends, and most importantly my relative, I realized what had happened. A couple years back I made a video about how I had been stalked for over 8 years by a woman I called Amy. That's not her real name, because I was protecting her identity. We kept in contact over the past couple years, and I thought I kept a good amount of distance between us, never letting her close enough to hurt me again. Obviously, I was wrong, because she has gone back to doing what she has always done, which is to try to hurt me, try to turn the people in my life against me, and salivate at the idea of me losing everything.
Creepshow then goes on to list all of the things Amy has supposedly done, but we can't take that as proof of anything because, well, we can only go off of Creepshow's words here, and as will be proven very shortly, that doesn't hold up based on the rest of the community post. For example, she says, when I was dating my husband, she sent him text messages telling him I was a horrible person and he should leave me. She made fake Facebook accounts to tell people about what a terrible person I was, and she just spent years fucking with me. Now don't get me wrong, it would be easy to fake some screenshots of a conversation Amy supposedly had with Creepshow's husband, but then again, at least having something, even if it was fake, would be indicative of some kind of care. The fake Facebook thing would have been even more easy to prove, but again, no link, no way to verify, only Shannon's word. I just forgot to take screenshots isn't a valid excuse if this happened over multiple years from the same person in several different ways. She should have mountains of evidence to verify the things she's saying, even if she only collected stuff later on in the timeline. And if this supposedly went on for 8 whole years, even if Amy had a child at some point. Since this goes back to high school, you'd think somewhere along the line Shannon would have already called the police. Is it possible Amy could have existed? Sure, but the things Shannon is about to say Amy's responsible for are so impossible that it could make any basic tech nerd laugh.
I thought we were okay, but I was wrong, because she's been posting on certain sites, posing as me, spoofing my IP, doxing my family members, writing things about myself and my friends, sending me death threats from other accounts, making false accounts to spam my comment section, spamming the comment sections of my friends saying hateful things about me in order to get them to drop me, and just all around doing what she did years ago.
Here it is, ladies and gentlemen, Shannon's big claim. Amy spent 2.5 years on lolcow.forum posting about Shannon because she disliked her from middle to high school. This supposed adult woman with a child and presumed job has apparently been sending self-harm and worse to Shannon for over a decade, posted on sock accounts to harass her, made multiple fake accounts to send hate, and now spoofed her IP for 2 years to make idle chatter about people on an anonymous gossip site, all to get back at her for apparently almost no reason. Do I even need to explain why the motivation doesn't work in any capacity? It's the most bullshitty, unable to prove hack answer I've heard since Caro the Wolf said his Telegram chat logs were done by Iranian super hackers. I mean, to be fair, Amy would have to be a super hacker to supposedly pull off what Shannon is claiming here. Do you know what spoofing an IP is usually done for? Denial of service attacks, or DDoSing, which involves sending traffic to the IP through various different sources to make it impossible to function. It's like clogging a blood vessel with deadly pathogens until it blocks, keeping the blood from circulating to the rest of the body, spreading disease, and causing the heart and brain to shut down from lack of it, killing the host. With that knowledge in mind, which sounds like the more logical option if Amy, a person that has consistently messed with Shannon since high school in so many ways with no proof, got a hold of her IP to spoof? Would she A, rampage for 2.5 years, spoofing Shannon's IP on not just one but multiple devices, all for the purpose of making shitposts and gossip anonymously, I suppose hoping some random person would be on that anonymous account to get back at Shannon? Or B, would they just do it once when getting the information so they could fuck up her devices? Which sounds like the easier, more straightforward way of messing with Shannon. Even if this Amy person is a complete imbecile, if they know the basics of how to IP spoof, they should also know generally what IP spoofing is used to do, as it's one of the main things listed on the Wikipedia page for it. For Shannon to make this claim, she must know literally nothing about IP spoofing, because to be able to do that from multiple devices, Amy would have to spoof multiple of her own devices as well, and even then, to actually get the traffic from the IP to go to her devices, she'd need a Trojan or something, and that isn't exactly easy to create, nor understand to where you can do something as seamlessly as what Amy supposedly did. That's not even taking into account cookies, which are basically downloads and attachments each site you use attaches and can cross-reference from other sites to help you, say, log into an account from another site. You have specific data relating to cookie usage that can't be replicated by any other device. And guess what? Websites asking for cookie sampling are able to see that shit. That's one of the reasons stated for how the admin crew could confirm it was Creepshow using the site from her own devices. Unless Amy has literally been able to break the laws of cookie usage and knew exactly what Shannon did on every website she ever looked at on her various devices over the course of who knows how many years, it can be assumed that the admins know what they're talking about, and they're only not showing more because certain data is illegal to show. Not to mention, every data code for cookies is unique and can't be replicated, leaving no room for it to be faked. The lolcow admins also have nothing to gain by outing Shannon for this and have had a good track record in the past, so with all the evidence and Creepshow's claims making no logistical sense, it's pretty much certain that she lied through her teeth on this aspect in a way that's provable through not only basic logic, but basic knowledge on how computers work. But how about, just for a second, we take the time to believe literally everything Creepshow said about Amy being able to use IP spoofing to create all these comments despite the fact it makes no sense in any way whatsoever. In regards to all of these comments, Creepshow says, "I am learning every day how much time she dedicated to harassing me, and it goes deeper than I ever thought." This implication and everything surrounding it in Shannon's post, as I've shown, is saying that Amy made all these comments with the express purpose of harming Creepshow, her reputation, her family, and more. If that's the case, however, why is it that so many comments have a back and forth between one another about Shannon's qualities? Since the person thought they could keep posting entirely anonymously, they actually responded to themselves on many occasions. In one instance, they say Shannon is rude and then reply to themselves saying they're dumb for saying that and Creepshow might make a video on them. It's like subtle earworming to create conversation that doesn't exist to serve as an example for everyone else potentially. Continuing with that same conversation, the insulter says they have dirt on Creepshow, Creepshow, and the same person responds to themselves multiple times saying they were a brat and that Creepshow shouldn't have to deal with people like that. Again, setting a precedent to defend Shannon on a matter like that. There are other instances where the person points to others and says shit like, she's our new Creepshow? She's a Creepshow art clone. At least Creepshow stands by her beliefs. I know we have decided to excise Creepshow, but she's on r/delusional artist for her merch. In reference to D'Angelo Wallace, he's worse than Creepshow. In reference to Hopeless Peaches, she sucks Creepshow's dick. These all give the impression that the person who made the account is trying to constantly shift the forum's focus from Shannon to someone else. There are even images where the person promotes Creepshow's work, not only plugging her subscriber join feature, but also at times she was getting others to re-upload her Lily Jean video if it got taken down. Sure, some comments say Creepshow is kinda bad, but they honestly pale in comparison to the number of supportive, whether straightforward or backhanded, comments left by this person. Even if the support posts were almost non-existent though, why would Amy decide to do that for Creepshow in the first place? If she's out to destroy her, why would Amy ever give Shannon any form of support whatsoever? Why would she concoct these elaborate situations, taking advantage of the anonymous function of the site, also that she could have a back and forth to defend Creepshow from herself? A thing you realize as you read all the posts is that a majority of them don't even really actually have to do with Creepshow herself, but rather the people around her. Whenever Creepshow is mentioned, it's something vaguely negative, but most of the time, it shows support to her while bashing other people. From the way Creepshow described everything, shouldn't it have been an incoherent flurry of petty or even worse insults directed at Shannon? Starting horrible rumors about her, getting the hate train moving, trying to keep everyone from discovering they're lying? Shannon even implies this was meant as some kind of impersonation, hoping people would figure out it's supposed to be like her through her IP, which I don't think she would have, guessed beforehand. But how would the average person be able to deduce that? It doesn't make sense as an argument. Also, I'd just like to point out how contradictory this line of thinking is to Shannon's original story time talking about Amy. It's not something I've seen many people cover when talking about the situation, maybe because the story is an hour long, but in watching it, a few revelations came to my mind that shocked and awed me beyond belief. Firstly, Amy only interacted in a negative way with Shannon over email, and one time possibly on Tumblr. She did this because supposedly Shannon lied to Amy for a long time about the friendship she had and who was her friend to look cool, and when Shannon finally let out the massive lie, Amy felt used and wanted to get back at Shannon. Shannon supposedly then blocked Amy and told all her friends she was a psycho, going about her middle school life until in high school she started getting emails telling her to off herself on a consistent basis. Throughout the story, this is the only way Shannon says she interacted with Amy, other than in one instance when her art was called racist, where Shannon believes Amy started the hate train for that on Tumblr. Then, after contacting Shannon's boyfriend to tell him to break up with her, she figured out who it was, and Amy let her know she only ever sent the emails because Shannon set off a psychological tick for her PTSD, and eventually, whenever she felt down, she would bully Shannon again to lift herself up. She apparently felt very bad for it, and though they weren't going to be friends, they supposedly still kept in touch and understood each other's perspective. Now tell me, where is any of that conveyed in the community post? In fact, if you look at the community post and the story time, it's almost like two completely different pictures are being sewn together. Let me explain by going into very specific detail on what's wrong with Shannon's telling of the story now.
Obviously, I was wrong, because she has gone back to doing what she has always done, which is to try to hurt me, try to turn the people in my life against me, and salivated the idea of me losing everything.
Never in the original story does Shannon portray Amy as a heartless, soulless supervillain out to destroy her life for what they did in middle school. The best argument you could make within the story time for her ruining Shannon's life, beyond the KYS emails, would be Amy trying to get Shannon's boyfriend to dump her. And if that's the end of your life, you had some first world ass problems in high school.
She made fake Facebook accounts to tell people about what a terrible person I was, and she just spent years fucking with me, non-stop, to the point where I just wanted to end it.
Again, like I said before, in the original story time, Creepshow never said that Amy made any Facebook accounts of her own. At best, when Shannon switched from MySpace to Facebook after a break from social media, she noticed the threatening emails started back up. It might sound like a minor difference, but making multiple Facebook accounts to harass her, and continuing the same emails she always did, has the difference of public versus private bullying. And what Amy did seemed to be almost entirely private, and if it was both with this new claim of Facebook accounts, why didn't Shannon mention it previously?
I had a sneaking suspicion she had been going back to this earlier this year, when I started receiving more and more images of self-harm and abuse in my inbox, because that was one of the biggest things she would do to me. When she was harassing me in high school, I would get so many images of self-harm and self-injury that it would cause me to shut down emotionally, and I had confided in her, back when we were friends, that was one of my biggest sore spots.
My previous statement can be applied to this one on a 10 times basis. Shannon says in her community post multiple times, but not once does she, in her original video on Amy, say that she sent self-harm or abusive images of herself. The only time Shannon brings up self-harm in general in relation to Amy is 1, when saying Amy helped Shannon stop harming herself, and 2, that the emails would supposedly tell her to KYS. This isn't a detail you could just sweep under the rug and forget about as if it got mixed in with other facts. If it heavily impacted and made you sick, why would you not even hint one mention about it, Shannon? I'm not asking for an image to be shown or anything, I just want to know why you failed to bring up such an important detail even once in the original story, when you were so open with other details.
I don't know how she did it, I don't know why she did it, but the moment my relative was brought up out of the blue, I knew it was her. She has literally always been obsessed with my relative, to the point of constantly bringing them up in our conversations, asking me about them, and using them to hurt me even in high school.
Why are we getting all these new goddamn important details to add to the story after it was told already with none of this in it? You wanna know how much Shannon's sister was brought up in the story? Like, once, in an offhand comment. If Amy had some sort of fixation on your sister leading to them wanting to dox her for some reason, why did you never bring it up? You constantly talk about how you isolated yourself in the situation and made sure no one knew about it. So wouldn't your sister know if this was an integral part of what happened? Is it me? Or half the time does it feel like not only a different, misremembered story is being told, but it's actually being changed as she goes in order to make it fit her own attempt at covering her ass in light of the lolcow posts? Unfortunately for you, Shannon, that bit about your sister is so specific, along with the multiple other aspects mentioned, that it's almost impossible you'd have never mentioned them in your original video unless you had completely lost all functions in thinking. Which can't be the case when the video is an hour long. When the video has no sources to back it up from 8 years of apparent trolling, you contradict many aspects of the video, including Amy's motivation and losing it upon meeting you, the tone of which you took to creating the story time in relation to your community post, the leaving out of key details in the story when actually doing the story time but bringing it up when it can possibly benefit you, and so on. How are we supposed to believe that? Did you seriously think no one would look to the original video to try and cross-reference it for clarity's sake? I know I'm about to talk about how you deleted videos that related you to the comments, but it probably would have helped you most to delete the Amy story, since it would have been the most obvious cover-up, but it would have helped you maintain the contradiction from the story time to the community post. Speaking of which, beyond almost everything I've discussed so far, Shannon has made a few other major mistakes while trying to address this. First of all, she started out continuing to make videos as though nothing had happened, and while in the case of more minor dramas, people can usually smooth things over and allow the situation to pass without acknowledging it, which is, in most cases, the smart move, Shannon underestimated the power with which people would want to have her held accountable, so that video didn't go over well. She also deleted a ton of storytime videos, and ones directly relating her to the lolcow posts, such as a video explicitly saying just how good lolcow actually is for artists, videos that were mentioned by the anonymous user, and a few other storytimes that people might have the ability to relate to Amy. When I pointed this out on Twitter, I did get an interesting response, that being she may have possibly deleted them as a stressed out reaction. However, no matter what reason she may have done it for, deleting several videos that are important to the comments for context purposes on the same day it's posted is still shady as fuck, and by now, knowing Shannon and her mentality based on these posts, I can only deduce it was intentional. Why else would she continue deleting videos after that? A stressed, thrill-of-the-moment response can only be an excuse for so long. I mean, only a short time before the drama, she got quote-unquote hacked by someone and just had her banner and header changed while removing her community posts. Usually when a channel is hacked, they don't just make it a mess of pixels for the banner and header. They change the name of the channel, change the name of videos, remove videos, or maybe even just turn the whole thing into a cryptocurrency account. They wouldn't just take down the community posts of all things. And while the banner and header were still like that, Shannon basically continued uploading like it was nothing, and that usually takes a long time to change. So you really want me to believe this isn't a middle schooler's interpretation of a fake hacking? This is unrelated to the current drama, but with just how recent it was and the fact that Shannon did remove shit from her channel under the guise of a hacking, I wouldn't put it past her to think she could sneakily delete these videos without people noticing. But unfortunately for her, Social Blade exists and can show exactly how many views she lost. And it looks like she continued deleting stuff as the drama has gone on. Oh, those were just random uploads isn't gonna cut it as an acceptable answer when it's obvious through archiving that isn't the case, Shannon. You can't trick everyone into remaining ignorant and not doing research. The same mentality goes into deleting your Instagram after leaving a vague post about taking legal action. It won't dissuade people from searching. And this is the part where I talk about the new Emily Artful video and everything goes even further to shit. I'm going to be completely honest when I talk about Emily's video in relation to this one. I should say that much of the more personal relationship business earlier in the video is especially hard to 100% trust without evidence. So I will not be covering those portions, but rather the important bits that can be gleaned using evidence, dates, etc. For anyone who doesn't know them, Emily Artful is a large art YouTuber who allegedly had her own harrowing experience with Shannon and her ex turned Shannon's husband, Anthony, which she goes on to compare to the Amy story Creepshow made and brings up several parallels. To summarize the video in as short a way as possible, Emily supposedly had a bad relationship with Anthony while a drug-addicted teen. The extent of abuse can't be proven, but based on Emily's interactions with Shannon and being in Anthony's music videos / talking to him in Twitter DMs, they did know each other and were a couple. They tried to have a professional relationship after Shannon started dating Anthony, that broke down, and Emily later got locked out of her Facebook by a stalker who took suggestive images from it, some being of her underage, made a photo bucket account with them, and sent some to her work to get Emily fired. As Emily started making story time, she consistently was asked to talk about Creepshow art because she was, quote, ripping her off. And after a short, seemingly amicable conversation with Shannon, Anthony followed Emily on Twitter, saying she was buying views for her first popular video. This is the first definitive instance that can be found of Anthony being odd and rude to her, and only minutes later, she received the same kind of insults and messages from an account called notviral_Emily. I can't prove that this was Anthony 100% with the same technical shit I did for Shannon's community post, but I also don't think it could be any more obvious if I tried from how they're mere minutes apart. And with Anthony's other shown behavior, this doesn't seem out of the ordinary at all. I mean, unless somehow, the biggest coincidence ever created, only a few minutes after Anthony followed and said that shit on Twitter, some completely unrelated person who had those exact same thoughts decided to use a burner Twitter account specifically to mock Emily and say that she was buying subs. Moving on, she has a story about the same stalker threatening to be coming for her in her city on Snapchat with screenshots, and the account leaves breadcrumbs hinting to them being underage, which Emily believes they did because Snapchat informs the other person when you screenshot their picture, so they'd know she was compiling evidence, and this was also on the second image that they send, after Emily had already screenshotted the first, so it matches up very well to her theory. Don't worry, this will come back into play later. From here, Emily shows she got the IP of multiple of the sock puppet accounts harassing her by pretending to be one of them and using a link to attach a tracker, and it got Shannon plus Anthony's exact locations both times, which was different thanks to them moving. Another pinpoint was actually a library, and Emily backs this up by showing them both saying in separate videos they worked on projects at libraries and Starbucks while homeless, matching once again Emily's assumptions. By the way, I should also just mention the two videos Emily uses as examples have since been taken down by the two. Just find that a bit of an interesting tidbit if the rest of the deleted shit is anything to go by. All this exposition and minor commentary was necessary to understand the main series of events I want to highlight, starting when Emily decides to confront Creepshow, thinking she and Anthony are the stalkers. Since the exchange is fully documented, I can analyze the entire thing and its aftermath to good effect, so let's go over what I find important. Throughout the interaction, Shannon denies any relation to the stalking or allegations, despite Emily's IP tracking and interactions with Anthony, though she does also mention that specific Twitter interaction, which is rather strange if you claim to not be too personally invested in the situation. During the conversation, she also tried on multiple occasions to say she had screenshots of the same person harassing her, but she never sends a single screenshot to Emily about the matter, or even an account profile. She also leaves a breadcrumb of mentioning a person called Something Filter being the one to harass her, and said they were wronged by Emily using a sob story, but they deleted their account before they could be reported. And through Shannon complying with the possibility of Emily filing a restraining order, that bit specifically plays back into what happened just before this Twitter interaction. While this conversation was on October 26, 2018, Emily also got a message from an account called Britta Filter on July 19th of the same year. This is where everything lines up, and it's the funniest, stupidest, most asinine excuse I've ever heard, and I thought Shannon's community post was something. And with breadcrumbs from the Snapchat that knew her general location, and Shannon mentioning it as well in the way that she did, I can only see that connection as her being involved in at least one way or another. Shannon specifically said that the account tried to say that they were wronged by her, and that they've been doing things to other art accounts for a while, and the account was deleted before she could report it, but the account was made the same month as when they contacted Emily and were posing as the sister of the person involved. So how could the shit Shannon mentioned with no proof in relation to this account make sense? The stalker never seemed to have the account, as it was made by their sister, as he apparently went off to a mental ward in her own words. So why would Shannon and co get harassed? You can even see in messages that the convo of this person and Emily goes on for at least a week. So why so much inconsistency on Shannon's part? Maybe because Shannon has some relation to the account and didn't think all the details through before creating it to enact the previously set breadcrumbs and continue to pile them on later to hope Emily would think a certain way? And doesn't that behavior also intersect with how the Amy contradictions came about between Shannon's community post and story time? I don't know. But anyways, guess what the account says? It was all her little brother from the very beginning that's currently, as of the message sent, only 15. Let me back up for just a second. This account corroborates everything Emily said happened in her earlier story with a stalker which she herself couldn't prove. It mentions the Facebook photos, how she was fired from her job because the stalker sent stuff to her, which I don't know how you'd send that and leave something to indicate you did it, but they also mention him being the account to send the fake sub stuff minutes after Anthony sent some tweets about the same thing, and having other shit of Emily's. At this point, Emily has been dealing with this harassment for 5 years. Do you know what 15 minus 5 is? 10. Fucking 10! You wanna know what I did at 10? I was in the 4th grade learning fractions and watching Steven Universe. I didn't know what porn was, let alone how to hack a Facebook account, make a photo bucket, and use that suggestive imagery to contact a business, write a formal email as a former client, and then get them to fire a girl. If a 10-year-old got an obsession with Amy like that, they wouldn't know shit about blackmailing of that sort. Obviously! Why would they have a grudge against her anyway? What's the kid's motivation? Was he just 10-year-old Charles Manson, following this for 5 years into his teenagehood without anyone noticing at all? You think I'm dumb enough to believe that? The account also wouldn't FaceTime with Emily about anything, another aspect to add on to the mountainous pile of bullshittery, because there should be no problem with that if the girl is genuine. Look, what ties back to this story in the end? The Snapchat stories implying they're a kid, and Shannon mentioning them with a completely different context that doesn't make sense and is basically contradictory to every other fact of the account without evidence, almost like she made it up along the way to seem more believable without thinking of the implications, hoping Emily wouldn't try to think of the exact details, sounding like another familiar situation I talked about in the same very video. How do you want me to take that? What other possible thing can I glean from this shit at all, other than Shannon being involved with the stalking alongside Anthony in some way? Believe that story from the supposed sister was true? Believe what Shannon said about the account that contradicts what Emily interacted with and doesn't make sense in the context of what the supposed account was saying without evidence? What other way is there to look at it when all the important information is presented that only someone like Anthony or Shannon would have, and the context of Anthony almost certainly being involved with some of the accounts mentioned based on IP tracking and how soon they were from him saying the same shit? There's also shit talking of Emily in the lolcow post, which I have basically shown without a doubt is Shannon. You can speculate Shannon's full involvement with it all you want, but she almost certainly knew about it based on the breadcrumbs she left, whether she was asked by Anthony to do so or not. She participated in it by saying shit on lolcow and spreading rumors, also lying about the entire situation and siding with Anthony, and she mentioned Emily and Anthony's Twitter stuff in their talk, information that you would not most likely have if you were just a passive observer in the situation when that interaction happened so long ago at that point. All I can see is a man and woman panicking after seeing their target starts collecting evidence when they begin to get a following and creating this story to point to and say it isn't them without getting all the details right, leading to them having inconsistencies in their story, and based on that paranoia, 4 months after that attempt failed, and 1 month after they thought they successfully got Emily to believe, nudging her into another direction when she even mentioned attentions at once. Then, Shannon made her first post on lolcow.forum to get the blame deflected from her and her husband, hiding under thinking she had the mask of anonymity to get others to not look for this piece of Shannon's history that could ruin her as an internet star. And thus, it all ties back into Shannon's lies. She banked on her interaction with Emily getting her to stay quiet about the whole thing in hopes it'd blow over, and she used the lolcow forums to cope and keep people away from that secret she held so close. Having back and forth with herself, pointing to other YouTubers to act as newer targets for lolcow to get them off of her, she'd gossip about others, get closer in with the crowd talking about her, and she looked out to try to make sure no one could ever get close to finding her secret whilst also getting them to support her. In the end, however, her recklessness and many inconsistencies in story with not only what she said about Amy, but what she said about the account for the supposed sister, and facts she let slip that most people in her situation wouldn't know, along with the shit that Anthony was confirmed to do, Creepshow opened herself to be shown for who she is if the scales tipped ever so slightly. And well, here we are. It shows just how paranoid Shannon really is about people calling her out online. It might just be because she has shit she doesn't want people to see or find out if they look. I don't know exactly what Shannon has done far back in the past, but whatever it is she might not want seen, she wants others to stay away. That was the phrase I wrote in this very script while preparing for the Emily Artful video, and it looks like my assumption was right on the money. Shannon is insecure about herself, she's petty, she's paranoid to the point she'd call out her own sister on lolcow and give them a way to mess with her to possibly divert attention from herself and use the forum to her advantage. And small note, I can tell you from experience, if Shannon has some trouble with her sister, the best way to handle it is not online. A policy you should always keep as a prominent content creator is to not rely on others to help you deal with your personal emotional baggage at your worst. It's unhealthy, and it's downright despicable to send hate to a family member because you may have had a falling out, no matter what it may have been. If she's willing to do that as a fully grown woman, I can't give her points for ignorance or inability to handle the situation because she's nearly 30 years old. Among her other qualities, she's a flip-flopper on her own opinions depending on the social environment she's placed in if it can help her trick others, i.e. YouTube and lolcow. It all paints a seemingly accurate but also hard to look at picture, and that brings me back to the Amy video. This part is pure speculation for me, and I will only state this as a theory, but it makes too much sense for me to not raise it as a possibility. Could it maybe be that the original Amy storytime was done as a coping mechanism for Shannon? That the whole thing is a lie intentionally done to make herself feel better, and that Amy isn't actually Emily as she theorized, but rather Amy is Shannon in the story. Think about it. At first, I was confused at Emily's assertion of her being Amy in the story time, as while some stuff was brought up that matched what Emily said and is shown in the Brita filter message, the story overall paints Amy as a sympathetic character who just used her attacks on Shannon through email as a way to cope with her own stress and trauma, having been set off by one action she did and continuing to justify it to herself by not seeing Shannon as a person, stopping after they talked to one another. Is it me, or in light of all that we've seen from Emily's video, does it sound like projection? Remember, the video came out only 3 months after the interaction between Emily and Shannon. If Shannon had been doing this shit alongside Anthony for so long, considering she's mentioned her own past and issues, does it seem so out of the ordinary she'd possibly use harassing Emily as a coping mechanism? Also, Emily even said that she may have started off her interactions with Shannon badly when she said that her singing voice was weak, so could that have also been projection, possibly? When it comes to what people like Shannon or Anthony do in these types of scenarios, they usually have to try and use their own twisted logic to try and make it make sense to them. So, could Creepshow have possibly put herself in the role of Emily so that she could have this imaginary scenario where she thinks that in that interaction they had together, they just actually made up? Could it all be just a self-delusion with the hints left there of Emily's story and so on, and calling her Amy, which sounds very similar to Emily, also that it's possible for her to link it back to Emily if allegations came out or something? Could that be the full context? It's an idea I feel strongly about, but for this section in particular, I should stress it's only a theory. Out of everything in my video, this is the part you should take with the most salt. But overall, in the end, the last thing I want to say about all this is when this all started, I don't know what I expected. I know there are people that like Shannon, but based on the behavior I saw her exhibit when looking into the Hopeless Peaches video and other videos of her, it seemed the type of behavior in the forum posts would be obvious from her. The insecurity about her own channel and wanting to keep others from gossiping about her like she does for others, the blatantly false, amateur way she tries to go about covering it up, the pure childlike behavior she indulges in while trying to delay just saying that she's not being truthful. It all emanates the same toxic behavior a lot of her content does, but with the Emily Artful stuff making so much goddamn sense with the evidence that I can definitely connect and see how a large portion of it links back to Creepshow, and the reason for the creation of the lolcow account in the first place, it was something I never could have guessed or even expected at all from Creepshow. I guess in that regard, for Shannon, the best advice I can give her is to admit what she has done wrong. Let others know that she lied about the Amy post, explaining why nothing makes sense from a logical, technological, or canonically told story perspective. Let them know about the forum post, because it's basically impossible for it to have not been her. Stop hiding her true self from the audience behind a mask and actually be genuine with them in a discussion of her actions. Make sure she understands why people are mad at her as well, not only from what she did, but how she responded to it and who she portrayed herself as. Remember when you got on people like Mangacommon for something as simple as choosing not to swear and calling Hopeless Peaches a racist for no reason? That kind of moral grandstanding you present is just coming back to bite you in the ass, and with the Emily Artful shit at this point, what you accuse Peaches of seems like the smallest thing ever in comparison, so yeah, don't ever try to get twisted why people are angry at you, and most of all, in the end, try to improve yourself, because that's really all of us talking about this want you to do, and there's no other advice I can give you than to do better. I've been Just Stop, thanks for watching, and ooh boy, that was a shit show.